There were a lot of exciting new issues that came out this week, but this is the one I was most excited about, and it did not disappoint. Howdy, I'm Kurt Williams, and today we're looking at issue 9, the final issue of The Deviant by James Tynion IV and Joshua Hixson. I have been a strong advocate for this series since it started coming out, which was more than a year ago. I started getting this series right around the time I started the channel, which was before I moved down to Georgia. Of course, it's no surprise that Tynion is writing a fantastic narrative here because he is just one of the best comic writers at writing people. I've said it about his other series, but in this series in particular, his human element is so palpable, so tangible, and so nuanced. He's so good at writing human drama that even if he had a terrible artist, it would still be a pretty good comic book overall. But when he pairs up with Joshua Hixson, who is a fantastic artist and really captures the drama just as well as the writing does, oh, it's a beautiful piece of art. Like, look at this double-page spread. You think that Tynion can just write down how he wants it to feel and then Hixson is able to just write exactly what he said? No, they have to have a shared vision, and Hixson himself has to execute that vision, and he does so wonderfully. There is so much energy in this spread here, so much emotion. And then it's immediately followed by one of his beautiful double-page spread title pages. I love these. In every issue he has one, and every time it blows me away. The mood is so good. So in this issue, we do finally find out who the new Deviant Killer is. And it's not who I think anybody suspected it would be, which is kind of nice, because if we had had a Scooby-Doo ending where they pulled off the mask and said, "Oh gee, it's one of the 3 supporting characters we met this episode, how surprising," then I think the story would have lost an element of realism. Instead, the killer has their own struggle of finding and embracing and expressing their identity, just like the main character had and just like the person who was framed as the original Deviant Killer had. From my perspective, this series has been about figuring out how to be yourself truthfully in a world that doesn't want you to be yourself. So we have 3 layers here. The first layer is we have this guy who was gay in the wrong place in the wrong time, and he was convicted of being a murderer. And he was kind of a pedophile, we can't let that slide, but he wasn't a murderer. The point of his story is that he was being himself, and society told him that if he was that, he must also be this terrible thing. In other words, because he was a deviant in this one way, he must be a deviant overall. The second layer is the main character, this journalist, who was pretty insecure about his sexuality growing up, and he didn't have any good role models to follow except for that one local serial killer guy. So he grew up kind of confused and not really sure how to safely express himself without also being linked to a murderer, at least in his own head. And throughout the series, he's suspected of being the new copycat Deviant Killer because there is a lot of evidence that would suggest that he's convinced himself that's the only way to express his sexuality. And he's never outright put into words in the story, but we can see it throughout the series that he is really struggling with this. It is weighing heavy on him, and he's confused. But the third layer, the one we finally get in this issue, is another character who has, I'm assuming, been so deep in the closet for so much of his life that at one point he just snapped, and the only person he saw living out the kind of life that he wanted to have was this guy in jail who was framed for being the Deviant Killer. So this guy is actually convinced that the only way to express this sexuality that he's finally coming to terms with is to be a serial killer. And there's this crazy moment where he's meeting with the original guy who got framed so long ago, and he's been sitting in jail this whole time, and he's trying to get him to tell him how it feels to kill these men. And Randall, the guy who's been in jail this whole time, is genuinely disturbed because he didn't actually kill anybody. He's just been kind of playing around with the idea because he knows he's never going to get out of jail anyway. So to see that somebody else is inspired by what they think he did and they want to go and do it as well is terrifying to him. Now, on top of these great character study moments, we also have some excellent action sequences, we have some truly unsettling reveals, and of course we have a very satisfying resolution with an explanation of how all of this unfolded. Though the 2 dangling threads that we have are that the main character, the journalist, hasn't really gotten anything good or bad out of this whole experience. He's still pretty much exactly where he was when he started, which maybe that's the point Tynion's trying to make. The other dangling thread is that we still don't know who the original murderer was. They never caught him, they put somebody else in jail, jail, and now this copycat killer was just a random dude. It's not like he's some Krampus-type demon who shows up to kill people every once in a while. He was probably just a dude, and we don't know who he was. And maybe that's just Tynion being a horror writer. What makes horror so good is that there's that element of the unknown that just lasts forever, right? So as far as conclusions go, I thought this was fantastic. It answered all my questions. It was fantastic art. The writing was fantastic throughout this series. Like I said before, Tynion can write people better than any other modern comic writer. Like, it's insane how much this feels like a Netflix show that you just want to binge, and how every issue feels like an episode, and there's really not that much space. I mean, space-wise, you get 10 minutes worth of a Netflix episode, but he's packing so much in there because the economy of word is so strong here. A lot of the time, he just uses a blank panel and a very specific expression that Hixson very specifically delivers to convey so much information that it's not necessary to even use words. And that is what perfect partnership between the writer and the artist looks like. I can't recommend this series enough. It is gruesome and graphic, but it is very well written and well drawn. If you've been waiting for the entire series to come out over more than a year, then you will be rewarded for your patience, because this series is such a package. I'm gonna give issue 9 and the series as a whole a 10 out of 10. I need to have a hardcover edition of this on my bookshelf. It's fantastic. I'm gonna be recommending it to people as often as I possibly can. We need more comics with this much meat on the bone. There is so much to dig into here and to think about. And the emotional impact of the series is off the charts. Every single scene leaves an impact on you. You should buy it. Ask your local comic shop when they're gonna get hardcover editions of this, because it will be worth it, I promise you. So that's my rating, 10 out of 10. There were some other really cool issue number 1s that came out this week, so I'm hoping to get videos on those out, but I am working on a couple other projects right now, like I'm looking into a couple states that I might tour soon. Stay tuned, there's good stuff coming. Until next time, I'm Kurt Williams, and you are somebody else.